Well, here at Federal Parliament today, as I say, we've seen the government notch up another legislative win. It's foreign fighter legislation passing in the last hour. On the voices, no division required, no vote required for that to pass through the Senate. The House has just risen as well in the last few minutes. And look, while the government's had wins in the chambers, it's still battling a bit of division outside the chambers when it comes to a few fronts. The Prime Minister this week, again, having to tell his coalition MPs to pull their heads in, not disrespect each other by freelancing too much on policy. We've seen Liberal MPs advocating for changes on superannuation, for an increase in the New Start allowance, for nuclear power as well. Yesterday, late yesterday, one of the new Liberal senators in his maiden speech, Andrew Bragg, advocated another change on superannuation, making it voluntary rather than compulsory, at least for those on lower incomes, earning up to $50,000 a year. Now, the Prime Minister says there's a bit of latitude here for those making a maiden speech, their first speech. That's where you're expected to lay out big policy ideas, may not necessarily be in line with the government's policy position of the day. But there's no doubt there's some frustration here at others who are certainly advocating for further changes on superannuation. The Prime Minister has said the review that's about to begin on retirement incomes is free to look at whatever it wants. It can look at all this stuff, but the government will not be adopting the ideas of voluntary superannuation or stopping the scheduled increase in the superannuation guarantee. More from Andrea Crothers.
Scott Morrison reaffirming who's in charge.
The government's policy, let me be very clear, is what's set out in what the law of this country is, and our policy hasn't changed.
That legislation, passed under a previous Labor government, will lift compulsory employer super contributions from 9.5% to 12% by 2025. Andrew Bragg is the latest backbencher calling for change, arguing that money would be better off in workers' pockets.
Super should be made voluntary for Australians earning under $50,000.
The new senator slapped down by his Senate leader.
The answer is no, and I've told him that privately. But let me say, and now publicly.
The division providing fresh ammunition for Labor.
Well, it's absolutely laughable.
What is the Prime Minister's response to the many members of his government still campaigning for those very policies?
The Prime Minister wasn't bowing down.
Yeah, but these things are free to be looked at as part of the review?
Well, reviews look at all sorts of things.
Meanwhile, the government's bid to repeal the Medivac laws have passed the lower house. Labor outnumbered this time around, but maintains doctors should have more say over medical transfers of asylum seekers in offshore detention.
That is something that is just basic decency, basic humanity.
The next hurdle is getting the repeal through the Senate, but a final vote isn't expected until a legal committee reports back in September. But with the current numbers the way they are, Tasmanian Senator Jackie Lambie could make or break the decision, and she's yet to declare her hand. Andrea Crothers, Sky News, Canberra.
As Andrea mentions there, the Medivac repeal that the government wants the Parliament to pass won't be dealt with until now towards the end of the year. Little sign Labor is going to wave through the government's wishes on that one. It wants to stand by the laws that were passed earlier this year against the government's wishes on Medivac. But on foreign fighters, the temporary exclusion orders to stop those foreign fighters, Australians who went to join Islamic State and other groups in Iraq and Syria coming back for up to 2 years, that has passed through the Senate today, having passed through the House yesterday, so that is now set to become law. What does it mean? The Home Affairs Minister, Peter Dutton, will be able to exclude those trying to get back into Australia for up to 2 years as security agencies get a better understanding as much as they can of what they've been up to, what risk they might pose to the Australian community, and then, as he puts it, manage their return under much heavier monitoring and understanding of where they're going to go, where the kids might go to school, because the 80 that are in refugee camps now in Syria, those who went to join up with Islamic State or were taken there by their husband, most of them are kids and most of the rest are women. Only 1 or 2 are actually men that we're talking about here. There are about 50 unaccounted for that aren't in those refugee camps. Some of them may be dead, others may have gone to third countries like Turkey. This law would obviously apply to anyone who is regarded to be a foreign fighter trying to return to Australia. So a win for the government on that. Labor had raised some concerns, tried to move some amendments, Centre Alliance as well, but in the end, it passed on the voices in the Senate this afternoon. A vote wasn't required.